Hello everyone, and welcome to Thoughts in Theorycrafting. I'm Dick Tango, and today I'm going to start this series, Thoughts in Theorycrafting, which is going to cover various aspects of video games. They're like the stats, the numbers, the strategy and reasoning behind why doing certain things is going to be good for your gameplay. I'm going to start with Call of Duty Modern Warfare Warzone specifically, though some of the information will carry over to the Modern Warfare multiplayer. And then I will follow up an update with the Black Ops Cold War as well, though it looks like Warzone's still got quite a bit of lifespan left in it, which is good. I'm going to be starting a set of tier lists about the various guns in Warzone for different uses. And today we're going to do the best ARs and LMGs for mid to long range. We'll be covering the in-between and worst ones in the next video. First thing I want to talk about the tiers. The tier system that I'm using here is going to be S, A, B, C, and D. That's going to mean that we're not going to have any F weapons today. No F at all. I don't believe that any of the full auto or burst ARs or LMGs are truly completely unusable. That's what an F tier weapon would be for me. The FAL is going to be excluded today because I wanted to stick with fully automatic and burst. The FAL fits a bit more in with the DMRs and arguably the SMGs still. So I'll be covering those in different videos. The S tier is basically going to be the very, very best guns. They may have very small weaknesses or limitations, but they're going to be maybe just one or two tiny things versus very many strong suits. They're going to be basically the most versatilely good guns. They're going to be good in the most situations. A tier guns are going to have just a little bit more in the way of limitations and or weaknesses. They're going to be extremely good still in the right hands. You may need to be skilled with a certain type of recoil. You may need to work around some small limitation, or just keep in mind that it's not as good as some other guns in some small ways. But these guns are going to be very good. We're going to go into B tier will be guns that have some notable but not crippling weaknesses or limitations. So maybe some of these guns might have a counterpart that's just going to do the same thing a little better. Some of these guns will have more likely these certain situations in which they work really, really well and other situations in which they do not work very well. Most of those guns are going to be very viable, and in the right hands, these guns may be as good as an A tier gun, but you may need a specific play style or skill set to make them work as well as an A tier gun. C tier is where it's going to get difficult to run these guns to be your best. They're going to have significant limitations, whether it be in the handling or the damage or the accuracy. They're just going to be hard to use very well. There'll be some scenarios, some situations where they'll be fairly solid or even good, but a lot of other scenarios and parts of the gameplay are going to be tricky with these guns. And then D tier are going to be just the worst here. They're going to be theoretically usable on the right day. You might be able to fry with these guns. You really might be able to get some good results. But overall, these guns are going to have several other options that do the exact same thing or close to the same thing, but significantly better. So there's really no reason to run any of the D tier guns. To support all of my ideas, other than the experience I've had in game, I'm going to be looking at truegamedata.com. I'm going to link the socials of the people who made it, as well as the site itself, in the description below. I encourage you to check that out. This site is excellent. Has the stats of the guns and the attachments. You get to compare them with handy charts and graphs. It's just an excellent way to help determine, say, what attachment do I do here? Do I run this gun or that gun for my loadout? This is something that will let you figure out what's going to be the best gun for you. The first two guns I'm going to talk about today are going to be the Kilo 141 and the PKM, because these are going to be my S tier guns. These guns are going to be the best in the most situations. We're going to get into why in a moment, but I'm going to be using these two guns to compare every other gun here to throughout these two videos, and that means that I will be showing you the graphs, the charts based off of these guns. So first, to get into the details of these guns, give you a baseline of what I'm doing for the builds. I'm doing 4 attachment builds that do not include an optic. I'll mention if a gun may not need an optic. We have very good iron sights, and that may help the case for a gun. But in these cases, I'll leave it to you to whether or not you want to pick like a reflex or a holographic or like a 3x zoom sight like the VLK. I'm going to be doing mostly the longest barrel, monolithic suppressor, the best foregrip, or ammunition, and or laser, like usually tack laser, but it just really depends on the specifics of the gun. So you can see the builds over on the side here as I go through. We're going to be comparing the stats here. Range modifier is just going to be ways to compare this gun to other guns. Hip fire is not going to be terribly useful because you're going to be using your other weapon, your shotgun or your SMG or whatever it is. The tactical sprint and sprint fire, they matter, but they are significantly less important. It's the situations would be like, oh, you're running for some reason next to a wall or building with your primary, not your secondary, but your primary out, and then someone pops around a corner and you have to kill them immediately. And the ADS will matter for that too, as well as a few other things, but really you should have had the other weapon out, or maybe just play a little away from that situation. So it's going to be a much smaller thing. So we're primarily going to be talking about the others. The benchmark for ADS for these 4 attachment guns is going to be around this 372 to 379 millisecond mark. The movement speed here right around the 4.22 or 4.23 mark. ADS move speed is going to usually be a lot higher on the ARs than it is on the LMGs. And then, as you can see, this PKM is going to be much slower. We're also going to ignore mostly the vertical and horizontal recoil control in these comparisons because, again, it's related to the original gun's properties. Bullet velocity is going to be very important. I'd say really you need about 1,000 meters a second bare minimum, and 1,200 plus feels much better. These like 1,1300 guns feel a lot better than the 1,000. And then reload time is obviously very important, so is mag size. As you can see, this PKM does have a very high reload time, but I think its other stats, its general mobility, especially when you end up comparing it to other LMGs, it's going to be worth it. Then you can do the base stat comparison here, where you get the damage profiles. Something that's really strong about the Kilo is the fact that it has 28 damage for the legs, arms, stomach, and chest. This is going to mean that you can start just a little lower with your aim, let it drag you up, and hit the chest shots, and you're not going to have any different damage for those earlier shots. And the way the Kilo's recoil pattern works is you've got maybe 5, 6, 7 shots that spread out a good bit, and then the last bunch of them all center in the same area. So that means even if you've missed a couple shots due to your tracking or your initial aim, as long as you get into the stomach, the leg, stomach, and chest area for those shots, you're going to be getting very, very good damage out. The recoil property is very easy to control as well, in my opinion. And then on the comparison charts here, I'm going to just show with 250 plates. I'm going to take out bullet travel time just because it's going to be a little visually simpler to see. As you can see, the PKM just has a better time to kill chest shots in every range, and it's similar in the other categories here, though the PKM does get a little worse than the Kilo in close range for headshots. But yeah, basically, as you can see, this PKM just has an absurdly low time to kill, 0.33 or 0.31 or something seconds quicker than the Kilo out here in the longer ranges, which do really matter in Warzone. A lot of your engagements are going to be out there. And the Kilo is still having a fairly respectable time to kill, even if it's in its farthest range, as you'll see as we compare in the other things as well against the other guns. And then at the DPS, where higher is better here, the PKM just beats out the Kilo in basically everywhere, except for if you do headshots, it does close the gap, but not enough. And then stomach and legs, the story is very similar. So basically, the difference between TTK or time to kill and DPS or damage per second in this is just going to be TTK is going to be you shoot a guy, you hit most of your shots, how quickly does he die? And, obviously that depends on how accurate you are, where you're hitting him, how many shots you miss. But it's going to be the kind of all-out how much time it takes to kill somebody outright. And then the DPS is going to be a little more important if they have in-between plates, if they've been tagged by another shot, or if you're shooting them with your teammate, say your teammate tagged them and you start to shoot, or you shoot them at the same time. DPS is going to generally matter more in those points because there are too many possible numbers of bullets to kill in those scenarios. So the TTK, these big gaps, is like when it jumps from X number of bullets to X plus 1 or 2 bullets. But yeah, that's going to be the basis of the comparison. So overall, the reason the Kilo and PKM get put through, which you'll see as we compare more guns to them later, they're going to both be very good in bullet velocity for their classes. The ammo and reload are going to be, for the Kilo, just solid, and for the PKM, is maybe the biggest weakness of it is that reload time. But I find myself never really needing to reload the PKM in like an oh shit situation, and getting screwed by that long period of time, even with just the 100 round mag without sleight of hand. Then the mobility, the ADS, and then of course like the damage and range numbers. Additionally, it's going to be your actual accuracy, which both of these guns have very, very easy to control recoil patterns. The PKM's goes straight up, a little bit of bounce, but not terribly hard to deal with. And the Kilo does curve up and to the left, but with the Kilo, there's a very low overall magnitude of recoil, and it's very, very easy to control. We'll sort of get into the other guns here. First thing I'm going to cover is this AK-47. So this is going to be the big surprise, I think, for a lot of people of guns that are going to go into the A tier. I've got 2 build examples here. Depending on how you like the feel of the AK, it does bounce around a little bit. I'd say that's its biggest weakness. But you can run it with the RPK barrel, the longest barrel that doesn't have a built-in foregrip, which blocks the underbarrel, and a commando foregrip. This ends up with a fairly respectable in mobility gun, though the Kilo does beat it out in aim walk movement speed, which is important for getting in and out of cover and staying on the move while you shoot. It's got respectable bullet velocity and better than the Kilo in reload time. And then this other build where I have the 23-inch Romanian barrel and tack laser instead of the commando, since the Romanian barrel has a bunch of recoil control because it has that built-in foregrip. This is where you get to a very quick operating build, great move speed, much better than the others here. Great ADS movement speed, much better than the others here, and it's going to have a little more bounce. It's going to be a little harder to hit the shots than the other 3 things shown here, but very good bullet velocity, and of course the same reload time. I'm running it with a 40 round mags just because the 70 round penalty is extremely high, and as I'll show you in a minute, the limitations of the 40 round mag might be a little bigger than you think. Going on to the actual damage output here, as you can see, that AK is extremely good with damage in the close range and in the mid and long ranges. It's going to be a little harder than the PKM to hit your shots with, but the damage is just going to be excellent throughout. And then the DPS, it's going to be a little lower than the Kilo, but still extremely good at range for a much more mobile gun. This is going to be why it's going to be A tier. And if you see here, I've got the 60 meters. It's just a number I kind of picked there, but I could do it at, say, 40 as well. Damage per magazine, and the Kilo and the AK are very similar. At 0 range, it's better on the AK, and at 60, it's the same as the Kilo in 0 meters of range, and at 60, it's better on the AK. So overall, I think it's a very solid gun. The one big drawback being that bounce, that visual bounce, as well as the actual bullets going side to side a bit. Try it around with some builds, see if you can handle it. It's not necessarily for everyone, but for those that it is for, it is very good. Next, I'm going to move on to the Bruen. I do still think that this gun sits in A tier. It's just a little lower, I'd say, than the AK, but I do think it sits here in the A tier. So we're going to go ahead and look at the builds for the Bruen. And you do have kind of 2 good builds to go now. I don't think you can afford to run tac laser instead of a commando if you run the 60 round mag. 60 round mag recoil is just a bit too much. The two options I have here are going to be with the 60 round mags or swapping the 60 round out for the tac laser. So as you can see, slow, noticeably slower ADS. This has always been a bit of a weakness for the Bruen. If you combined the 60 round and commando, you did get better than this, but it was always slower than the PKM and Kilo. You get very good movement speed. That's always been a weird strength of the Bruen, where even the 100 round Bruen has a very good movement speed, and also a very good reload compared to the PKM. Solid bullet velocity, and with the commando, it's still a laser. Thing shoots very well. 60 round mag is obviously going to have the quicker reload for fewer bullets, but the higher ADS and the harder to control recoil. As you can see in the damage charts here, the Bruen does have a nice, really strong mid-range damage, even when shooting chest shots, and it gets a little better even when you're shooting the stomach compared to the PKM. But the Bruen does drop off pretty hard compared to the PKM, and it's at its mobility level. I don't really think that it's quite as good as the Kilo or the PKM here. The time to kill difference between the Bruen and the PKM is pretty significant, and it's a lot closer to the Kilo, so the Kilo's mobility kind of puts it a little ahead. Still an extremely good gun, and if you are the kind of person that really likes the Bruen still, I'm sure you are going to have a fine time with it. The next one we're going to look at here is the CR56 AMAX. This is a very interesting gun. I think it's excellent. Goes into A tier for me. And the big limitations on this are going to be the 45 round mags, as well as the visual recoil, and then this lower bullet velocity. This isn't awful. It's completely serviceable, but it is a little harder to adjust for, especially at longer ranges. Has a little bit quicker of a reload, very good movement speed, and ADS movement speed is excellent. This matters a lot. The ADS is fairly slow. This is a pretty notable downside of it. I really don't think you can run the CR56 without a foregrip, and if you run commando, you do miss out on the mobility a good bit, though you do get a little better ADS. If you go down here into the damage, though, this is where it shows its strength. For its relatively good mobility aside from the ADS, actually very good mobility aside from the ADS, it's got a great time to kill at all ranges. It's beating out both the PKM and the Kilo for some small ranges in the middle here. Really not even small range, just 35 to about 69 meters, 68 meters here. And then massively beating the Kilo out at the farthest ranges while only being a little behind the PKM. And then at close range, if you happen to have it out, you're going to benefit from that damage a lot. This thing shreds up close. I really do like this gun also as a close and mid-range gun, like pairing with a sniper. And as you can see here in the DPS, it's still very solid. It does go a little down because of that slower fire rate compared to the Kilo, but still better than the Kilo in basically every range, especially in the far range here. And then on our next gun, I'm going to be talking about the Grau. So this gun did get nerfed a while back with damage range as well as a little bit of recoil, though I really still can't tell the recoil difference. But I think it's still A tier. It was S tier. It was better than the old Bruen in my opinion, but it is very good. As you can see, it's got a great ADS, great movement speed, and you can even run this with a 50 round mag and get better movement speed. And ADS movement speed is excellent as well. Great bullet velocity, quicker than the Kilo reload time for the 60 round mag still. It's just an all-around excellent gun, and then the Archangel barrels has the most excellent iron sights. So you're going to have no issues hitting targets if you decide to run the tac laser instead. And you start comparing a tac laser Grau to a holographic, for example, Kilo, and you're looking at a huge mobility difference. The Grau has the same exact damage profile as the Kilo, and that means it's going to do the same damage to legs, arms, stomach, and chest. It's just an easy gun to hit shots with and do solid damage. It's still got a solid headshot multiplier like the Kilo. So as you can see in the DPS, the Grau is a little behind the Kilo basically everywhere, and out at longest ranges, the DPS is extremely close. But if you look at time to kill, again, you're going to have some ranges where the Kilo in the middle here does beat it notably, but especially right here in this about 75 to 88 meter range, though that's pretty far. But all the way out in the maximum ranges, it's barely behind the Kilo for being a much more mobile gun. This gun is absolutely excellent. I highly recommend people still using it. I think it fits particularly well for a fully loaded class, so when you come back from Gulag as a solo in your games and you really need to be able to fight right then, you can pick up a Grau with fully loaded and just absolutely shred with it. It's an excellent gun. Then we're going to be talking about here the M13. This is just a great all-around gun. It is going to be lacking a little bit in some departments, but as you can see here, it's got a crazy good ADS, very good move speed, a little better than the Kilo and ADS move speed, very good bullet velocity, comparable reload and magazine size. As you can see, this last damage range is where the M13 really shines. For being as mobile as it is, it splits the difference here in long range damage with the PKM quite well. And at close range, it's not that far behind the PKM and the Kilo. This mid range is where it's a little weak, between the 55 and 88 meter range. It's a significant range, but it isn't the hugest difference of time to kill, about 0.8 to 0.87 seconds, so pretty small. And then things get a little better for it with the headshots. It just straight out beats the Kilo past 49 meters if you're hitting mostly headshots, and there's gonna be a little fudging around if you're hitting chest and headshots, but I think you get the point. And looking at DPS, it does very well versus the Kilo as well with headshots, and beats it because of that higher fire rate in overall DPS versus the Kilo in the longer ranges, of course. So you're going to have a very good all-around gun. It's very extremely accurate even. I think it's probably easier to control for most people than the Kilo, and it's just going to absolutely shred people, especially if you're hitting some headshots. And then the last gun we're going to be talking about today for the best guns, I'm going to leave B through D tiers for the next video. This is going to be the M4A1. This gun is exceptional, all-around gun, and though it does do a little better in the short and mid ranges than it does for the very longest ranges, it's still a very great gun for long range. So I did set it up with a Grenadier barrel because I am really trying to maximize the range values of all of these guns, though running it with the Corvus Custom is very viable. A lot of people love the iron sights on this gun, so running it with a tack laser or some other attachment instead of your optic is completely viable. And it's very high, generally very high damage means that it's stronger into the closer ranges if you happen to have it out than a lot of other guns. As you can see, it is a little slower in this build than the ADS, though if you go Corvus Custom, it's going to be a little quicker. The move speed's better, the ADS move speed's much better than the Kilo. The bullet velocity is nearly as good as the Kilo, reload's a little better, not noticeably. It's got the same damage profile as the Grau and the Kilo, so you're going to have a very good time whether or not you're hitting chest shots. If you're hitting stomach and leg and arm shots, you're still going to have very good time to kill. It's very easy to kill people with. And as you can see in this longest range, though I do think it's going to be harder to hit shots on the M4 than it is the Kilo, to the point where the M4 will have an effectively lower time to kill. It still does very good damage out there, and it's this mid-range that keeps it from being the best of the best, where the Kilo does beat it, and it's got that little area where it drops off where the Kilo hasn't yet too. But still, very solid gun. A lot of people love its recoil. I think it's a little tough to control personally because it kind of it climbs and then stops climbing and then starts to climb again, so I have a little trouble with it, but a lot of people love it. So if this is a gun that you're comfortable with, this gun sits solidly in the A tier. That's going to be all for the A tier guns today. Be sure to go check out TrueGameData.com. If you like the video, give it a like. Feel free to give me a subscribe. I'd love to see you guys for the next video. And like I said, be sure to check out True Game Data. I cannot stress that enough. They are absolutely excellent. But I will be seeing you around. Thanks for watching.